Ben Wolf, who played Infantata and Meep in American Horror Story, tragically died in 2015 at the age of 34. The 4'4" actor was crossing the street in Hollywood before he was struck in the head by a car mirror when the driver apparently didn't see him. Wolf was rushed to the nearest hospital before succumbing to a resulting stroke. This heartbreaking video shows a zoo bear still walking in circles 7 years after being freed from the small cage she was kept in for 2 decades. In July of 2023, 57-year-old Barry Griffiths suddenly died after accidentally stabbing himself in the stomach while trying to separate 2 burger patties that were frozen. In 2002, 15-year-old Kara Robinson was kidnapped by serial killer Richard Ivanitz and subjected to 18 hours of abuse, but she managed to escape after manipulating Ivanitz to feel at ease and memorize the details of her surroundings before running off. Robinson was then able to give police a detailed description of the home, which allowed them to bring the serial killer to justice. As a children's hospital worker in Tennessee, Georgia Tan would lie to new mothers and tell them their babies died after childbirth, only to turn around and sell them to whomever was willing to pay top dollar, many of whom were pedophiles. She eventually became a millionaire thanks to this sick scheme, as it's estimated that she stole more than 5,000 babies over a 26-year span, one of which grew up to become professional wrestler Ric Flair. Unfortunately, Georgia passed away in 1950, just months before her awful crimes were uncovered. An embalmer from Texas was recently arrested after allegedly mutilating the corpse of a 58-year-old man she was embalming. After learning he was a registered sex offender for graping a woman in 2001, Amber Laudermilk used a scalpel to slice off the dead man's groin and then shoved it down his throat. She reportedly did this in front of her embalming student right after telling him, "You didn't see anything." Laudermilk has been charged with desecrating a corpse and is being held on a $5,000 bond. In 2021, Lady Gaga's dog walker Ryan Fisher was walking 3 of her French bulldogs in Hollywood when he was suddenly attacked by 2 men. After being shot in the chest, which resulted in permanent damage including the partial loss of a lung, he still tried to protect the dogs, but 2 of them were taken. Gaga later offered a $500K reward for the return of her pets, and 2 days later, a woman brought the dogs to an LA police station. The woman was later arrested along with 4 others in connection with the crime and tried to sue Gaga for not paying the reward money, asking for the $500K plus another $15 million for financial damages, pain and suffering, mental anguish, loss of enjoyment of life, and legal fees. She claimed that she never would have returned the dogs if not for the promised reward, and was therefore defrauded because she ended up with no dogs and no reward. The woman ended up losing the case, while shooter James Jackson pleaded no contest to attempted murder and was sentenced to 21 years in prison. In 2006, 40-year-old actress Adrienne Shelley was found dead in her apartment bathroom, hanging from a shower rod in the bathtub with a bedsheet around her neck. Though initially ruled a suicide, it was later determined that Shelley was murdered by a construction worker who was trying to rob her. After breaking into her home, the 19-year-old had accidentally knocked her unconscious while covering her mouth to prevent her from screaming, but decided to kill her and make it look like a suicide out of fear of getting caught and sent back to Ecuador since he was an illegal immigrant. When the Goths attacked Constantinople in 378 AD, they were left stunned when one of the defenders stormed out of the city completely naked, decapitated one of the attackers, and proceeded to drink the blood flowing from his neck. Shortly after witnessing this, the Goths retreated in horror. During a 1900 college football game in San Francisco, hundreds of fans climbed on the roof of a glass factory to watch the game. But the roof wasn't built to support so much weight and eventually collapsed, dumping the fans into a scorching hot glass furnace where 22 of them died horribly and hundreds more were injured. Despite the tragedy, the game was never paused. In 1983, Carla Faye Tucker murdered a couple with a pickaxe while attempting to rob them, striking each of them more than 20 times and later saying she felt a sexual thrill with each blow. Tucker was sentenced to death for her crimes, but after converting to Christianity during her time in prison, there was a worldwide campaign to spare her life, even involving Pope John Paul II and the brother of one of her victims. However, Texas Governor George Bush ultimately blocked the appeal, saying, "The gender of the murderer did not make a difference to the victims," and Tucker was executed by lethal injection in 1998. South Carolina woman Mary Wilson was using her blow dryer when she suddenly passed out with her hand on top of it. The dryer continued blowing hot air directly onto her skin for at least 20 minutes, causing third-degree burns all the way to the bone. Wilson was rushed to the hospital, where doctors found nerve damage so severe they had to amputate her entire hand. The yellow outline is the size of SeaWorld's parking lot. The green dot is where orcas will spend their entire lives. Morbid Facts, Part 559. Just last year, a man from India sliced open his pregnant wife's womb with a sickle to check the gender of the 8-month-old fetus. He wanted to make sure it was a baby boy after the couple had 5 daughters in a row and a priest told them it would be another girl. The baby ended up being a boy, but died as a result of the husband's heinous actions. A woman boarding a flight in Orlando was recently arrested after killing her dog in the airport bathroom. She apparently didn't have the right paperwork for her dog to board and couldn't take it, so she went to the bathroom and drowned it. In 2003, teenage Nevada siblings Bo and Monique Maestas bought some meth but were given salt instead. Outraged, the two went to confront their dealer at his home, but the door was answered by the dealer's young children instead. Despite this, the siblings attacked the children, slitting the throat of a 3-year-old and stabbing her in the head, while a 10-year-old girl was left paralyzed after a knife severed her spinal cord. 19-year-old Bo was sentenced to death, while his 16-year-old sister received life in prison. Atticus Schaefer, who played Brick in Modern Family, has type 4 osteogenesis imperfecta, aka brittle bone disease. The painful disorder prevents his body from building strong bones, causing his bones to break rather easily even from minor trauma. The 4'8" actor has fractured his bones countless times and received dozens of plates, rods, and screws in his legs. Despite this, Schaefer has noted that his struggles with the genetic disorder have helped him become more empathetic and compassionate as he's had to constantly overcome extreme pain. In 2014, some sick piece of human garbage glued dozens of razor blades to playground equipment at a park in Illinois. Several children cut themselves while climbing the monkey bars or using the slide, but the perpetrator was never caught. In 2012, a married cop from Atlanta named William Martinez died from a heart attack while having a threesome with his friend and a woman who wasn't his wife. Afterwards, Martinez's wife was awarded $3 million in a malpractice lawsuit when the jury found that his doctor didn't properly diagnose his heart condition or warn him to end all physical activity until further testing was completed. When he was a young boy, actor Terrence Howard witnessed his dad stab a man to death while they were waiting in line to take pictures with Santa Claus at a department store in what became known as the Santa line slaying. The victim, who was also with his family, reportedly made a racist comment to Terrence's father Tyrone after he thought he cut the line, which quickly escalated to a fatal fight. Tyrone was arrested and pleaded self-defense since the other man attacked first and was sentenced to 11 months in prison. After a deadly Peruvian avalanche in 1962, 2 American climbers traveled down to investigate and later warned Peruvian authorities that there is a threat of a much larger avalanche just waiting to happen. These warnings were not only ignored but actively suppressed by the Peruvian government, as the climbers were accused of fear-mongering and anyone who even mentioned their research was arrested. 8 years later, the deadliest avalanche in history occurred there, completely destroying the town of Yungay while killing over 30,000 people. Bodybuilder Denise Rutkowski was once the runner-up for Miss Olympia in the mid-90s, but several years of steroid and drug abuse have led to quite a tragic downfall in her appearance. Someone brought this to a Mexican robotics competition and was disqualified immediately. Instead of improving working conditions and wages, Foxconn installed these safety nets throughout their locations in China to prevent workers from taking their lives. Foxconn is one of the world's largest contract electronics manufacturers and the largest producer of iPhones in the world. For 37 years, the mother of St. Louis man Adam Smith told him to never touch the wrapped box in their freezer, claiming it was filled with important relics from her wedding, including the topper for her cake. But when she passed away in 2019, Smith decided to finally investigate the box, and what he found was far more disturbing than he ever could have imagined: a pink blanket wrapped around a mummified dead baby. Very little is known about the infant other than that he was less than 1 year old, was wearing clothes from the 60s, and wasn't murdered. Smith remains haunted by the idea that it was likely the corpse of his baby brother that he never knew about. Just 2 days after his 18th birthday, star football player Warwick Dunn lost his police officer mother in a fatal shooting while she was off duty. But despite this, Dunn raised his 5 siblings while in college and was selected as the 12th overall pick in the NFL draft. He's since funded and built over 150 homes for single mothers, using his wealth to improve their lives. In 2008, suspected serial killer Ricky Simmons was found dead of heat stroke in the trunk of his ex-girlfriend's car. Investigators believe Simmons was waiting in the trunk to ambush and murder his ex-girlfriend when he became locked in the vehicle. A few years after receiving a bone marrow transplant to treat his leukemia in 2019, Nevada man Chris Long discovered that the DNA in his blood and semen had been completely replaced by that of his donor. Long had essentially become a chimera, a person with two different sets of DNA. He was quoted saying, "I thought it was pretty incredible that I can just disappear and someone else can appear." Experts say this was an extremely rare case, but one that raises serious questions about forensic evidence at crime scenes. In 2012, tragedy struck when 30-year-old newlywed Maria Pantazopoulos was having some trash the dress photos taken in Montreal while wearing her wedding dress. She was only standing in about a foot of water on a river when her gown became waterlogged, quickly pulling her deeper and deeper underwater as her dress suddenly weighed up to 100 pounds. The photographer did everything he could to save her before Maria cried out, "I can't anymore, it's too heavy," and then she let go. Her body was recovered by a scuba diver 2 hours later. In 2008, a college student from Belgium decided to heat up some leftover spaghetti that had been sitting out on the kitchen counter for 5 days. He told his parents that it tasted strange, but figured it was the new tomato sauce that he added to the pasta. After eating the entire bowl, he headed out to play some soccer but had to return home 30 minutes later while suffering from severe abdominal pains, headaches, and nausea. He then vomited for several hours before finally managing to fall asleep, but he never woke up. The man's lifeless body was discovered the next morning after he died from an extreme form of food poisoning known as Bacillus cereus, aka fried rice syndrome. In 1997, the Cat in the Hat Thanksgiving Day parade float careened out of control due to high winds, knocking a lamppost into the head of Kathleen Carana, putting her in a month-long coma. She sued Macy's and the city for $395 million and ended up settling for an undisclosed amount in 2001. Kathleen eventually purchased a nice New York City apartment with the settlement money, but just 5 years later, Yankees pitcher Corey Lidle crashed his plane into her building and the engine ended up in her bedroom. Luckily, the crash happened just minutes before Kathleen was due to arrive home, but Lidle and his flight instructor were both killed while 21 others in the building were injured. Adding to the weirdness of this story, the flight instructor's friend was also supposed to be on this flight but got stuck in traffic and told them to leave without him. So he managed to escape death until just 1 month later when he was killed in a separate plane crash. 18-year-old student John Savage was spared during the Columbine massacre in 1999. He was hiding underneath a table in the library as Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were going around shooting random students. At one point, Harris aimed his gun at Savage and told him to identify himself. A friend of Klebold's, John showed his face and asked Klebold what he was doing. The shooter responded, "Oh, just killing people." Savage then asked if they were gonna kill him, to which Klebold responded no and told John to run out of the building, which he did. Cello player Mike Edwards was an original founding member of the band Electric Light Orchestra. Tragically, he died in 2010 when a massive hay bale rolled down a hillside and collided with his van. Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny and many more, started smoking at age 9 and changed his name from Blank to Blanc after a teacher told him he would amount to nothing just like his name. He was once involved in a head-on collision at a Sunset Boulevard intersection known as Dead Man's Curve, a spot notorious for accidents. The crash resulted in a 2-week coma, and he was completely non-responsive until a doctor decided to ask him, "How are you feeling today, Bugs Bunny?" Blanc then responded to him in the voice of Bugs, and thus woke up from the coma. This also happened in the middle of production for season 1 of The Flintstones, for which Blanc was the voice of Barney Rubble. So during his stay in the hospital, the other actors would crowd around his hospital bed to record their lines. Around 40 episodes of The Flintstones were recorded in this manner. After the legendary voice actor died from heart disease and emphysema in 1989, his tombstone read, "That's all, folks." In 2022, James Grimes won an air guitar competition while on a cruise to Mexico, which was the last thing he remembered before waking up overboard in the Gulf of America without a single ship in sight. Grimes had to tread water for over 18 hours and endure countless stings from 2 swarms of jellyfish before he was finally rescued by the Coast Guard. 17-year-old Lisa Noland planned to take her own life just before she was abducted by serial killer Bobby Joe Long. He raped her several times and held her hostage for 26 hours until she managed to convince him to let her go. Lisa got the man captured, while the traumatic experience gave her a new lease on life and inspired her to become a police officer. After brutally murdering his ex-girlfriend's parents with a baseball bat in 2001, just last week, South Carolina man Brad Sigmund was executed via firing squad, the first such execution in the United States since 2010. Sigmund was given a choice and opted for firing squad over the other state-approved methods of lethal injection and the electric chair, since he said it was much quicker than the other methods, which have inflicted prolonged and potentially torturous deaths on his friends. Sigmund was strapped to a metal chair with a hood over his head and a target placed over his heart, while 3 volunteer officers fired at him from 15 feet away. Just last year, a 23-year-old man died from a catastrophic spinal injury while playing at a Topgolf with some friends. In what was described as a prank gone wrong, his drunken friends had pushed him off the platform, causing him to miss the safety netting and fall 12 feet directly onto his head. In 1990, a flight heading from Medellin, Colombia to New York City crashed onto a hillside after running out of fuel, killing nearly half of the passengers on board. While being treated for serious injuries, 2 of the male passengers were arrested when ER doctors found baggies of cocaine that they'd swallowed and attempted to smuggle. Both men were sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. The British Pet Massacre was a week-long event in 1939, during which an estimated 400,000 cats and dogs, 1/4 of England's pet population, were killed out of fear of them eventually being gassed or left behind during an evacuation. Almost immediately afterwards, the event was recognized as completely unnecessary, stemming from social panic from the impending war and people seeking a way to feel like they were contributing to the war effort. None of the fears that led to the massacre actually ended up materializing. Iconic actor Jack Nicholson has faced his fair share of legal controversies over the years. In 1996, he reportedly assaulted an unnamed Hollywood socialite at a party and ruptured her breast implants. Then that same year, he allegedly promised a prostitute named Catherine Sheehan $1,000 for sex and then assaulted her when she asked for the money. Sheehan claimed that Nicholson promptly grabbed her by the hair, thumped her head on the floor, and then threw her out of his house. She received a $40,000 settlement, but later argued that this was insufficient to cover her injuries, including brain damage, which she said was actually killing her. In 1849, Henry Box Brown escaped from slavery by shipping himself in a small wooden crate from Virginia to Philadelphia. Despite the instructions on the box of handle with care and this side up, carriers placed the box upside down or handled it roughly several times. 350 miles and 27 brutal hours later, Brown stepped out of the box a free man and went on to become a magician. When later asked why he went to such an extreme to escape slavery, Brown was quoted saying, "If you've ever been deprived of liberty as I was, you cannot realize the power of that hope of freedom." When Robin Williams appeared on the Inside Actors Studio in 2001, an audience member laughed so hard at one of his jokes that he developed a hernia and had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. In 2012, a movie theater in Beirut was raided for showing K-porn, and 36 men were arrested and subjected to anal examinations to determine their sexual orientation. In Lebanon, people can be charged with intercourse contrary to nature, specifically intercourse that involves anal penetration, and can receive up to a year in prison. In the past few decades, some morbidly obese patients have been sent to zoos for MRI and CT scans because standard hospital machines can't accommodate their weight. Zoos have bigger machines designed for large animals, making them practical solutions in these extreme cases. Chicago's Iroquois Theater was advertised as absolutely fireproof when it first opened in 1903, but the building only lasted 37 days before being destroyed by a massive fire that killed 602 people, in the deadliest single-building disaster in the United States until 9/11. Stormy Jones suffered from a rare genetic condition where her liver was unable to remove cholesterol, raising her cholesterol to 7 times the normal level for her age and resulting in 2 heart attacks before she turned 6. In 1984, she became the world's first successful recipient of a simultaneous heart and liver transplant. Her life was miraculously extended by another 7 years, but she tragically passed away in 1990 at the age of 13. Taylor Mitchell was a 19-year-old folk musician from Canada who was attacked and killed by 2 coyotes during a hike in 2009. She is currently the only documented adult to have been killed by coyotes. After President John Adams' daughter Abigail was diagnosed with breast cancer, she had a mastectomy performed on her with a fork, wooden razor, and a spatula. Without anesthesia, the breast was fully removed only to reveal that the cancer had spread to her lymph nodes, so the doctors had to slice out those tumors as well. To stop the bleeding, the wound was cauterized using the heated spatula, and the entire surgery only took about 25 minutes. Everyone was amazed that she never cried out in pain during the brutal operation, but she tragically died from the same cancer just 2 years later. Last year, Wisconsin elementary school teacher Madison Bergman faced 10 felony charges for having an inappropriate relationship with her 5th grade student. Investigators were shown disturbing screenshots of their text conversations, in which Bergman would talk about how much she enjoyed making out with the young student. The two also exchanged over 100 letters, love notes, and artwork over several months. She was reportedly still graping him up to 3 months before she was supposed to get married to her fiancé. Bergman has pleaded not guilty to all 10 counts. Ohio sex worker Linda Lassess prompted a multi-state public health alert after police discovered she'd slept with more than 200 clients while knowing she was HIV positive. Officers worked hard to contact her clients and suggest getting tested so they could seek the proper treatment. Randy Woodfield was drafted by the NFL to play for the Green Bay Packers in 1974, but was soon cut from the team due to a series of indecent exposure arrests. He would go on to become the I-5 killer and is believed to have been responsible for over 40 murders throughout the early 1980s.